Topic: How small decisions shape a life. When people imagine how their future will unfold, they often picture a handful of decisive moments. Choosing a major, accepting a job offer, moving a new city, and or ending a relationship. These events certainly matter, but what actually determines the arc of a person's life is actually usually less dramatic. It is the accumulation of countless small decisions. Whether to read for 10 minutes before bed, whether to respond kindly when irritated, whether to save a little money or spend it impulsively, that ultimately shape who we become. These choices happen quietly, almost invisibly, and yet they carry a surprising weight. Psychologists sometimes refer to this pattern as micro-behavioral drift. This idea is simple. Minor choices repeated regularly push our attitudes, habits, and identities in specific directions, often without our awareness. A person who decides to walk for 10 minutes each day does not feel transformed after a week. But after a year, they may notice improved stamina, better sleep, and even a clearer mind. After 5 years, that same 10 minutes walk might evolve into a non-negotiable ritual that defines part of their identity. I am someone who takes care of my body. Meanwhile, someone who frequently chooses convenience over health may gradually form an identity aligned with their actions, even if that identity was never consciously chosen. This phenomenon mirrors what economists call path dependence. The idea that small early events can permanently shift the trajectory of complex systems from markets to technologies to personal life. A classic example is a QWERTY keyboard. Its layout was not selected because it is the most efficient arrangement of letters, but because the early typewriters had a mechanical limitation that required spacing frequently used keys apart. Once people learned it, the world standardized around it. A small technical constraint from the 19th century still dictates how billions of people type today. Similarly, a small preference formed in childhood, such as an interest in drawing or fear of public speaking, can persist long after the original cause has disappeared, influencing career choices, friendships, and lifestyle patterns. The same principle applies to emotional reactions. When someone consistently responds defensively to criticism, the behavior can harden into a default response. Over time, others may avoid offering honest feedback, reinforcing the defensive person's belief that criticism is hostile or unfair. Conversely, someone who practices openness to critique may gradually build confidence and resilience. The initial emotional response is small, it lasts only seconds, but repeating it can create a long-term pattern that shapes relationships and self-perception. One of the most interesting aspects of small decisions is how they interact with uncertainty. People often assume that long-term outcomes depend on big, deliberate plans. We are encouraged to ask, where do you want to be in 5 years? But this question assumes the future is predictable. In reality, life is filled with unpredictable encounters, opportunities, and crises. Because we cannot control these events, the best strategy is often to develop habits that allow us to respond flexibly. For example, someone who cultivates curiosity, reading wisely, asking questions, welcoming unfamiliar ideas, will be better prepared for unexpected changes in the job market or shifts in technology. Curiosity itself is a small behavior. An extra click, a moment spent wondering instead of dismissing, but over time it becomes a mindset that equips a person to adapt more easily. Small decisions also have a cumulative moral effect. A single act of kindness, holding a door, sending a thoughtful message, offering help, may feel insignificant, but repeated kindness shapes not only one's relationships but also one's internal narrative. People often underestimate how much their behavior toward others determines how they view themselves. If you habitually act generously, you eventually begin to think of yourself as a generous person. This self-conception then influences future actions, creating a reinforcing loop. On the other hand, repeatedly choosing convenience over consideration can slowly shift a person toward self-centeredness without any moment of conscious intention. Modern society complicates the matter further. Digital platforms are designed to capture attention, and attention is the gateway to decision making. When algorithms run what we like, they subtly steer us toward predictable patterns. The same news source, the same videos, the same opinions, the same fears. Every time someone scrolls instead of reading or reacts emotionally instead of pausing, a small choice is being made. These micro choices accumulate, shaping beliefs and habits. Over months and years, people may find that their worldview narrowed without their noticing. What changed them was not a single persuasive argument, but thousands of small, repeated exposures, and each one only seconds long. Understanding the importance of small decisions does not mean that big decisions are irrelevant. Rather, it shifts the conversation toward what actually creates change. A person can decide that they want to become healthier, more disciplined, or more empathetic, but the decision itself does little unless it is translated into small, consistent actions. In this sense, identity change is less like flipping a switch or more like adjusting the direction of a ship by a few degrees. At first, the shift is barely noticeable, but over time, the ship ends up in an entirely different destination. A useful way to think about this is through the concept of micro alignment. Every behavior either aligns you slightly closer to your desired identity or pulls you slightly away. The movement is tiny, barely perceptible, but the direction matters. Suppose someone wants to improve their writing. The goal is abstract and overwhelming if treated as a single large project. But if the person commits to writing one paragraph a day, the commitment becomes manageable, even enjoyable. After months of small daily practice, their skill improves noticeably. After years, writing becomes a natural extension of how they think. The identity of a writer emerges not from one ambitious leap, but from accumulated micro alignments. Another intriguing area where small decisions play a critical role is interpersonal conflict. Many conflicts do not erupt suddenly. They escalate through tiny moments of misunderstanding, sarcasm, or impatience. A tense relationship can often be tracked back to dozens of small choices. Choosing not to ask one more clarifying question, choosing to assume negative intent, choosing silence instead of honest. Fortunately, the same mechanism works in reverse. Rebuilding trust rarely depends on one dramatic apology. It depends on consistent, small demonstrations of reliability and respect. The smallness of these actions paradoxically makes them more powerful because they accumulate over time and feel authentic. Small decisions also influence how people approach goals. Some individuals rely on bursts of motivation, waiting for inspiration before starting a project. But motivation is inconsistent, and when it fades, progress stalls. Other individuals rely on systems, daily routines that make action automatic. Systems work because they convert decisions into habits, reducing the mental effort required. Brushing your teeth every morning doesn't rely on motivation. It's simply part of your identity. The most successful people in almost any field have developed systems that convert small tasks into non-negotiable habits. Non-negotiable habits. They remove the question, should I do this today? And replace it with this is what I do. This is what I do. The paradox is that people often overlook these subtle forces precisely because they are subtle. Large decisions demand attention, so people plan carefully for them. But small decisions feel too trivial to matter, so they are made automatically. In truth, these unnoticeable choices often do more to sculpt a life than dramatic turning points. A person who consistently shows up on time develops a reputation for reliability. A person who listens more than they speak becomes known for wisdom and composure. A person who leads consistently becomes articulate and informed. None of these outcomes require extraordinary talent, they require quiet persistence. Another overlooked aspect is how small decisions shape emotional regulation. Choosing to take a deep breath before responding in anger may seem insignificant, but it can prevent a damaging spiral of conflict. Spiral? Choosing to pause for 10 seconds before sending a message can prevent a misunderstanding. Choosing to focus on gratitude for a moment each day can gradually shift the person's overall emotional tone. Emotions feel large, but they are often the product of many small mental habits practiced repeatedly. Finally, small decisions influence meaning. People often search for purpose as if it were hidden in a single revelation, but meaning rarely arrives through a dramatic event. Instead, it emerges gradually from actions that reflect one's values. Helping others, developing skills, contributing to a community, or working toward goals that matter. A meaningful life is built through a collection of days in which small decisions align with a person's deepest intentions. Purpose is not discovered, it is assembled. In the end, the power of small decisions lies in their consistency. They are the quiet architects of identity, shaping the person we become, the relationships we build, and the future we create. By paying attention to these seemingly trivial choices, we can gradually steer our lives toward greater clarity, integrity, and fulfillment. The changes may be slow, but they are steady, and over years they become profound. Topic: Why people fear change and why they need it. People often describe themselves as creatures of habit, yet modern life constantly asks them to adapt. New technologies reshape how they work, shifting social norms, alter how they communicate, and unexpected challenges force them to reconsider their plans. Despite this, many individuals resist change, sometimes even when the change is clearly beneficial. Understanding why this happens requires examining not only psychology but also biology, culture, and the structure of human decision making. The fear of change is not a simple emotional response. It is a deeply rooted survival, survival mechanism that influences how societies evolve. From a biological standpoint, humans developed in environments where stability offered safety. Early survival depended on recognizing familiar patterns, safe food sources, reliable shelters, predictable weather, and known threats. Anything unfamiliar triggered caution because novelty carried risk. This instinct remains active today. Even though most modern changes are not life threatening, but brain responds to uncertainty as if danger were imminent. Neurological studies show that when people encounter unfamiliar situations, the amygdala,
Amygdala.
amygdala,
Amygdala.
amygdala. Neurological studies show that when people encounter unfamiliar situations, the amygdala activates, preparing the body for fight or flight responses. At the same time, the prefrontal cortex, which supports reasoning and planning, temporarily reduces its influence. This imbalance causes people to feel anxious or defensive even before they have consciously evaluated the situation. Psychologists call this phenomenon lose aversion bias. People dislike losing more than they like gaining. A potential loss feels heavier than an equivalent potential gain. For example, someone who is offered a new job with a higher pay but unfamiliar responsibilities might hesitate. Rationally, the opportunity seems advantageous, but emotionally, the individual anticipates the possibility of failure, embarrassment, or regrets. The fear of losing comfort outweighs the excitement of improvement. Loss aversion explains why people stay in unfulfilling jobs, maintaining the unproductive habits, or avoid difficult but necessary conversations that the status quo feels safer even when it slows their growth. At a cultural level, fear of change is reinforced by social expectations. Communities often create rules, traditions, and norms that encourage stability. These structures help maintain order, but they can also discourage deviation. A student who wants change major might worry about disappointing their family. And adults who want to pursue a creative career may feel pressure to choose something more conventional. In each case, the resistance to change is strengthened by not by personal preference but by fear of social consequences. Throughout history, societies have often rewarded conformity and punished those who challenged the norms, even when their innovations later proved valuable. Organizations experience a similar dynamic. Companies schools, and governments frequently resist change even when the need is obvious. Executives may avoid adopting new systems because failure could harm their reputation. Teachers may hesitate to try new instructional methods because evaluation systems reward consistency rather than experimentation. Politicians may reject reforms because their supporters uh, politicians may reject reforms because their supporters fear instability. Organizational inertia occurs not because leaders are unaware of problems, but because the perceived risk of change outweighs the potential benefit. Ironically, this resistance often leads to larger crises when delayed decisions finally become unavoidable. Yet, despite all these obstacles, change remains essential for growth. Nature itself demonstrates this principle. Forests periodically burn, allowing new ecosystems to emerge. Rivers shift their courses, carving new landscapes. Biological evolution depends on variation, which would be impossible without constant change. Human development mirrors these natural processes. People may mature not by repeating old patterns, but by confronting new experiences that challenge their assumptions. One of the most powerful benefits of change is cognitive expansion. When individuals expose themselves to unfamiliar environments or ideas, the brain forms new neural connections. This plasticity enhances creativity, problem solving, and emotional resilience. For example, learning a new language forces the brain to reorganize how it interprets sounds and grammar. Traveling to a foreign country reshapes how one's understanding of cultural norms and daily routines. Even small experiences, trying a new hobby, reading an unfamiliar genre, or meeting someone from a different background can spark mental growth. Another advantage of change is the opportunity for personal reinvention. People often feel trapped by their past choices, believing their identity is fixed. However, psychological research shows that identity is fluid and continually reshaped by behavior. A person who begins exercising regularly may come to see themselves as disciplined. Someone who volunteers consistently might develop a sense of social responsibility that they never expected. Even professor identity can shift. Many individuals discover new strengths not only after stepping outside their comfort zone. Reinvention does not require abandoning the past. It requires allowing oneself to evolve. Reinvention. Change also builds emotional strength. When people face challenges moving to a new city, adjusting to a new role, navigating a difficult relationship, they develop coping skills that prepare them for future uncertainty. Without these experiences, emotional resilience cannot grow. Avoiding discomfort might feel safe in the moment, but it weakens a person's ability to handle unexpected difficulties later. Conversely, conversely, facing discomfort in controlled, manageable steps can dramatically increase confidence. This is why therapists often encourage clients to engage in gradual exposure, small, repeated behaviors that reduce fear over time. Gradual exposure. Still, it is important. Still, it is important to recognize that not all change is inherently positive. Rapid or forced changes can overwhelm individuals and communities. When transitions happen too quickly, people may lack the resources, information, or emotional preparation needed to adapt. In these cases, thoughtful planning and support systems are essential. The goal is not constant disruption but balanced, intentional growth. Change becomes beneficial when it is aligned with one's values and pursued at a sustainable pace. To navigate change effectively, people can adopt several strategies. The first is reframing uncertainty as potential. Instead of viewing changes as a threat, individuals can question what opportunities might arise. What new skills might I learn? What new relationships might emerge? What new perspectives could expand my worldview? Research shows that when people imagine positive outcomes, they activate brain regions related to motivation and planning, reducing fear. A second strategy is breaking change into small steps. Humans adapt more easily to incremental transitions than sudden shifts. Someone who wants to shift careers might begin by taking one evening course. Someone who wants to improve their health can start. Someone who wants to improve their health can start with 10-minute walks rather than drastic routines. Small actions reduce psychological resistance while slowly building momentum. Over time, these small decisions accumulate into meaningful transformation. A third strategy is seeking supportive communities. Change becomes less intimidating when shared with others. A group of co-workers. A third strategy is seeking supportive communities. Change becomes less intimidating when shared with others. A group of co-workers implementing a new system. A group of co-workers implementing a new system can motivate each other. A family adjusting to a move can strengthen bonds through mutual encouragement. A student joining a new club can feel welcomed rather than isolated. Social support does not eliminate uncertainty, but it creates a buffer that makes risks feel manageable. Lastly, embracing change involves accepting the reality of impermanence. Everything relationships, jobs, beliefs, abilities changes over time whether we accept it or not. People often cling to the illusion of permanence because it feels comforting, but resisting the natural flow of life only increases anxiety. A healthier mindset recognizes that change is not the enemy of stability, it is part of stability. Even long-lasting relationships require continuous adaptation. Even meaningful careers evolve as industrial even meaningful careers evolve as industrious shifts. Accepting impermanence allows individuals to move through transitions with greater calm and clarity. When people look back on their lives, they often realize that when people look back on their lives, they often realize that their most meaningful periods were those in which they accepted the change rather than avoided it. New friendships, personal breakthroughs, and unexpected opportunities frequently arise from moments of uncertainty. What felt frightening at the time often becomes a turning point in hindsight. Likewise, the most difficult transitions, loss, failure, disappointment sometimes lead to discoveries about resilience and character that would have been impossible without disruption. This is way In this way, fear of change is not something to eliminate completely, but something to understand and manage. It is a natural signal from the brain urging caution. But caution is not the same as paralysis. By combining self-awareness with intentional action, individuals can distinguish between changes that threaten their well-being and those that support their development. The goal is not to be fearless, but to be willing to try to run, willing to try to run, to adjust, and to grow. Ultimately, change is the engine of progress. Without it, societies stagnate. Innovations disappear and personal growth halts. Yet with thoughtful adaptation, change becomes a powerful tool for building a meaningful life. It offers people the chance to redefine themselves, challenge outdated assumptions, and pursue new possibilities. Life does not wait for perfect certainty. It unfolds moment by moment, shaped by the choices people make when facing the unknown.